Our daughter banned us from her wedding, not forgot to invite us, not kept the guest list small. She banned us explicitly, coldly, proudly. And the worst part, her perfect day. The day she thought would prove she didn't need us. It shattered right there, in front of everyone. I'm glad you're here. Because I need to tell this carefully, slowly, the way it happened. People keep asking how a family can break like this. How a daughter can turn on the parents who raised her, fed her, protected her. I ask myself the same thing every morning. So let me start from the beginning. Because her wedding day doesn't make sense unless you see the cracks forming long before the collapse. This didn't happen in some strange, chaotic household. No, we were ordinary, predictable, stable. A small town, a small house, small dreams, nothing flashy, nothing extreme. My wife and I worked simple jobs. We lived quietly. We raised our daughter, Emily, with all the love to plain people could offer. We were not perfect, but we were consistent. We were present. And for years, she was the bright center of our world. When she was little, she used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. She'd squeeze between us and whisper, "Don't let go of me." My wife would stroke her hair. I'd hold her tiny hand. We'd wait out the storm together, the three of us, like a little island of safety. Growing up, she'd run through the house like a streak of sunlight. She'd sing loudly in the mornings, almost annoyingly happy. She'd call out, "Dad, look at this." "Oh, Mom, listen to me." And we always looked, we always listened. She was our only child. Maybe that was our weakness. We poured everything into her, and in doing so, maybe we pushed her without realizing it. You never know the mistakes you're making as a parent until the consequences are already rushing toward you. But all that came later. First came the years of innocence. Emily was around 16 when I first felt something shift. Not a break, not a crack, just a shift so subtle, I almost ignored it. She became distant, not rebellious, not rude, just distant. The dinners she used to chatter through became quiet. The hugs she used to give freely became stiff. Her laughter, that bright, ringing sound that filled our house, grew rare. I told myself it was normal teenage behavior. You know how it is. They pull away a little, trying to grow into themselves. But you noticed small things. How she began spending more time on her phone, typing long messages, then hiding the screen when we walked in, or how she'd say she was going to study with friends, but the friends never mentioned it, or how, once or twice, she came home with a different expression, one I couldn't place. Not sadness, not excitement, something in between, like confusion mixed with guilt. My wife noticed it too. One night she whispered to me, "Do you ever feel like she's slipping away from us?" I didn't want to worry her, so I said, "She's growing up, it's normal." But deep down, I wasn't convinced. The distance grew slowly, like a shadow creeping across a room. Nothing sudden, nothing loud, just steady. Then came the arguments, small ones at first, about curfews, about chores, about money, normal things, I guess. But the tone changed. She sounded sharper, somehow, as if everything we said annoyed her. But still, this is life, right? Families go through phases. Parents worry, kids push away, the cycle continues. That's what we believed. Anyway, we held on to that belief, because the alternative was too painful to consider. Still, a small ache settled inside me, a quiet fear that something was pulling her away from us, something invisible and powerful. But I didn't have a name for it yet. I didn't have proof. I just felt it, that soft, unsettling tug, like a rope slowly loosening between us. Years passed. She graduated high school, then college. We celebrated everything with her. Birthdays, little achievements, big milestones. But even in those celebrations, there was a thin layer of distance. She smiled, but her eyes weren't always in the smile. When she introduced us to her boyfriend Mark, something in my chest tightened before I even knew him. He seemed polite, calm, a little too calm, perhaps. He shook my hand firmly, but his eyes flicked away quickly, as if calculating something. I didn't dislike him, not at first. I just felt unsure. But Emily liked him, more than liked him. She clung to him in a way she had never clung to anyone before. Looking back, I wonder if that was the first real warning, the first sign that someone else was stepping into the center of her world, and maybe pushing us out. But we told ourselves not to overthink it. She was an adult. She was allowed to love. We didn't know then what that love would cost us. Things continued smoothly on the surface. Too smoothly, in hindsight. Because beneath every calm surface lies something unsettled, waiting for the right moment to erupt. The moment came one afternoon. 2 years into her relationship, she told us she was engaged. We congratulated her. We genuinely did. My wife cried. I hugged Emily so tightly she laughed and said, "Dad, you're squeezing me." But even in that moment of joy, something felt off, like the pieces of the puzzle weren't lining up. The excitement in her eyes flickered strangely, a flicker that didn't look like joy, more like fear, or hesitation, or maybe something she didn't want us to see. I asked her gently, "Are you happy, sweetheart?" She nodded quickly, too quickly, like she had rehearsed it. That flicker stayed in my mind. It hovered there, like a faint alarm bell ringing far away. If only I had listened to it sooner. If only I had paid attention. But I didn't. Not then. Not until it was far too late, until the day she told us we were not welcome at her wedding. And even in the shock of that moment, I had no idea just how badly her perfect day would collapse. Because sometimes, fate has a strange way of revealing truth. It doesn't whisper. It doesn't warn. It waits for the biggest stage, and then exposes everything in one brutal moment. That moment was coming. We just didn't see it yet. Not even close. Before everything spiraled, before the shouting, the heartbreak, the wedding, the band, there was a time when our life felt steady. Predictable. The kind of life you don't fully appreciate because it's always just there. Soft around the edges, familiar like a favorite blanket, quiet in all the right ways. Our house was small, but warm. A single-story place with creaking floors and windows that hummed during winter winds. My wife liked to keep the kitchen smelling like something sweet, cinnamon, vanilla, or whatever she'd found a new recipe for. And Emily, even in her early 20s, would still wander in after work and lean her hip against the counter, chatting with her mother about nothing and everything. Those evenings were the kind that don't look important while you're living them. They just feel normal, comfortable, safe. Emily's room still looked the same as it did when she left for college. Fairy lights strung across her bookshelf, a half-broken jewelry stand she refused to throw away, notes pinned to her corkboard, reminders, quotes, little jokes she wrote for herself. Sometimes, when she came home, she'd wander into her room and sigh, "I miss this." And we'd smile, thinking she meant us. Maybe she did, maybe only part of her did. She was working at a small marketing firm back then. Nothing glamorous, but she talked about it with enthusiasm that filled the house. She'd sit at the dinner table, explaining campaigns, deadlines, co-workers, the little office politics she found funny. My wife would listen with soft eyes. I would listen with pride. Our daughter was growing, building a life, becoming her own person. She still hugged us goodbye every time she left the house, still kissed her mother on the cheek, still whispered "love you" when she didn't think I'd hear. And that felt enough. It felt like everything was on track. She'd bring Mark around sometimes, not often enough to feel routine, but just enough to suggest she was serious about him. He'd sit at our table with polite posture, hands folded neatly, speaking only when spoken to. He wasn't rude, not unfriendly, just still. He always seemed like he was watching something behind us, like he was taking mental notes. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about him didn't match the softness of our home. Still, we treated him with kindness. We asked about his job, his plans, his family. We welcomed him in, because that's what you do when your daughter brings someone important into her life. Looking back, I wonder now, did he ever truly see us as part of her world? Or were we just background noise? But at the time, none of that seemed urgent. That Emily talked more openly when he wasn't around. She'd curl up on the couch with a blanket over her legs, scrolling through her phone as she told us about her week. Sometimes she'd share little stories about Mark, how he made her laugh, how he corrected the way she held a pen, how he suggested she change her hairstyle because it suited her face better. My wife raised an eyebrow the first time she heard that, but Emily brushed it off. "It's playful," she said. "He's just got opinions, yes, strong ones, but still, their relationship looked normal enough. A little uneven at times, sure, but whose relationship isn't? We didn't interfere. We didn't pry. We trusted her. We trusted the years we had spent raising her to know her own worth. Our life moved in its same predictable rhythm. Weekend chores, grocery trips, movie nights, birthday dinners. Emily would join us when she could, sometimes with Mark, sometimes alone, but slowly and very quietly, something began to shift again. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, just small changes, almost invisible unless you knew our daughter as deeply as we did. She visited less, her messages became shorter, her hugs became one-armed, distracted, and the sparkle she used to carry in her voice whenever she talked to us, it faded. I tried to explain it away. She's busy, I told my wife. She's building her career. She's in love. It happens. But my wife didn't answer right away. She just kept staring at her tea, swirling the spoon slowly, her brow furrowed with a worry she didn't want to voice. Sometimes, when Emily would come home after weeks of silence, she'd sit at the table with us, but seem far away. Her phone would buzz, and she'd check it quickly, shielding the screen with her hand before slipping it back into her pocket. My wife and I exchanged glances more than once. Not accusatory glances, just confused ones, soft, unsure, searching for reassurance in each other's eyes. One night, while clearing dishes, Emily mentioned casually, "Mark thinks I should spend less time driving back and forth between here and the apartment. It's tiring." Her voice was casual, but the implication hung heavy in the room. My wife's hands paused over the sink. "Oh," she said softly, "but you've always loved coming home." Emily shrugged. "I guess things change." She said it with a tone that wasn't sad or angry, just distant, a gentle distancing, a slow but deliberate pulling away. And again, nothing big enough to confront, nothing dramatic enough to label as a problem, just that same creeping shadow I had felt years ago, edging its way back into our lives. Still, everything on the surface remained polite, calm, stable. Emily would still laugh at our jokes, hug us before leaving, tell us she loved us, but each time, something in her eyes looked tired, conflicted, like she was balancing two worlds and wasn't sure which one she belonged to anymore. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down, I felt that someone, or something, was filling her mind with ideas that didn't match the girl we had raised. But then again, maybe I was imagining it. Parents worry, parents overthink. So I kept quiet. Weeks passed, then months. Emily and Mark announced they were moving in together. We helped her pack. We helped her carry boxers. We helped her set up the apartment, even though Mark looked uncomfortable with us being there. Emily thanked us repeatedly. She hugged us tight that day, tighter than usual, and for a moment I felt the old warmth again. But it didn't last, because that night, as we drove away, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror. Emily standing on the sidewalk, Mark leaning close to her, whispering something in her ear, and Emily nodding, slowly, her expression tense, almost guilty. My wife saw it too. She didn't speak for the rest of the drive. And for the first time, I felt it clearly. Not a shift, not a shadow, a crack, small, but unmistakable. A warning sign I wish I had understood sooner. The inciting moment, the one that started everything, didn't explode into our lives. It didn't slam through the door, or come wrapped in drama. It arrived quietly, soft, almost forgettable. But looking back now, I realize it was the first domino, the one that tipped everything else. It began with a phone call. Emily called us on a Thursday evening, her voice tighter than usual, like she was trying to sound cheerful while holding back something heavy. "Hey Mom, hey Dad, do you guys have a minute?" People only open conversations like that when they're about to drop something loaded. My wife and I exchanged a look, then sat down at the kitchen table. Emily hesitated. I heard the faint hum of her apartment in the background, and something else, a low murmur, like someone was nearby. "I wanted to talk about weekends," she said. "Mark and I are trying to figure out a routine." A routine. The word felt clinical, rehearsed. "Okay," I said slowly. "What about weekends?" "Well," she exhaled sharply, "we've been feeling like we don't get enough time together. So, we're thinking maybe I won't come home every Sunday anymore." There it was. Small, simple, reasonable on the surface, but it hit like a pinprick in the chest. Not because of the request people grow, schedules change, but because of the way she said it, like she was confessing something she wasn't ready to confess. My wife forced a smile into her voice. "That's okay, sweetheart. Just come whenever you want. You know the door is always open." I felt her hand tremble on the table. Emily laughed a little too loudly. "Great, yeah, thanks. I didn't want you to think I'm avoiding you." Avoiding, no one had used that word but her. It lingered in the air long after she hung up. We tried to shake it off, telling ourselves it wasn't a big deal, but the uneasiness settled deep inside me, like a pebble dropped into water that kept rippling long after the sound was gone. The following week, the second pebble dropped. Emily canceled dinner with us. Then she canceled again, and again. Each time the excuses were reasonable. "Work ran late. I'm exhausted. Mark and I already made plans, nothing alarming on the surface, nothing you could point to and say, this is wrong. But each reason had a new tone, a strained, distant quality, as if she was reading from a script someone else wrote. The next incident was even smaller, but it's the one that truly unsettled me. I had driven past her apartment complex one afternoon, on my way back from an errand. I wasn't spying, I wasn't checking up on her, I was just in the area, on impulse. I decided to drop off some homemade soup my wife had cooked. It was still warm in the passenger seat, wrapped in a towel so it wouldn't spill. I texted Emily first, "Hey kiddo, I'm in your area, want me to drop off some soup?" No response. A few minutes later, "Can't today, busy." Short, no explanation. Just, busy. I waited a moment before pulling away. Then, through my side mirror, I saw someone step out of the apartment gate. It was Mark, laughing, carrying shopping bags, walking with another couple. Not busy, not at all. That was the first time a real distrust flickered in my mind. Not twat. Emily twat him. I didn't say anything that night. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but something in that moment shifted, a small tear in the fabric of trust, widening bit by bit. The unease grew deeper. A week later, when we invited them both for dinner, a normal invitation, a simple family night, Emily declined, but the way she declined felt wrong. Her message read, "Mark thinks it's better if we don't mix things too much right now. He says routines are important for stability." I stared at the text for a solid minute. Routines, stability, don't mix things. Those were not Emily's words, not her tone, not her voice. That was him. My wife leaned over my shoulder, reading the text with me, her lips pressed into a thin, pale line. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "I don't know," I replied, but my stomach tightened. Still, we tried not to overreact. We told ourselves, they're adjusting to living together. Every couple has growing pains. Maybe Mark is controlling, but Emily will see it eventually. Maybe she just needs space. Maybe we're imagining things pop. Maybe. The maybes piled up until they became heavy. The real inciting incident, the one that dragged the truth into the light, came on a Sunday morning. We were drinking tea when my wife's phone buzzed. She glanced at it casually, then froze. "It's a picture from Emily," she said. Her voice held a strange tremor. Not joy, not surprise, something else. She handed me the phone. It was a picture of Emily and Mark, at brunch, smiling, clinking glasses. Happy, relaxed, perfectly at ease. The caption read, "Just needed some peace today." Peace, as if we were the chaos. My wife swallowed hard. She told me she was home resting. She said she had a headache. I stared at the picture again, not because of the lie, everyone lies sometimes, but because of her eyes. Emily's smile didn't reach them. They looked tired, dull, almost resigned. As if she wasn't celebrating, as if she was performing happiness. That image stayed with me all day. It gnawed at me, slow and quiet. And that night, something inside me snapped, gently but decisively. I realized we were no longer in her inner circle, no longer part of her real life. We were audience members watching from far away, collecting scraps and hints of what her world looked like. And someone, I was sure of it now, was encouraging her to keep us in the shadows, not directly, not with outright hostility, but with subtle comments, a raised eyebrow, a nudge, a suggestion. "Your parents are too involved. You need boundaries. You're an adult now. They shouldn't expect so much, but holding you back." I could practically hear his voice without ever hearing the words. Still, we didn't confront Emily. We didn't accuse her. We didn't want to push her even further. Instead, I lived in that uncomfortable in-between space, not fully worried, not fully peaceful, just suspended. Like a tightrope stretched between hope and dread. The final moment, the true turning point of this section, came during a seemingly harmless visit. Emily had come home alone. Her hair looked different, darker, straighter, styled sharply, not her usual soft look. My wife complimented her, but she shrugged. "Mark thought this suits me better." Just that, simple, dismissive. But when she turned her head, I saw it, the tiny bruise hidden near her ear, barely visible, easily missed. I didn't say a word. Not then, not with her looking so brittle, but something inside me went cold. This was the moment the uneasiness transformed into fear. Not fear for us, but for her. because something was happening in her life, something she wasn't telling us, something she was hiding behind forced smiles and short messages. And whatever it was only getting worse. The bruise near Emily's ear haunted me. It wasn't large, it wasn't obvious, but it didn't belong on her face. Not on the girl who used to twirl around the living room, carefree and glowing. Not on the woman who once begged me to teach her how to ride a bike because she trusted me to catch her if she fell. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe she bumped into something. Maybe she hit her head on a cabinet door. Maybe it was makeup smudging strangely. But none of those explanations settled the nausea twisting in my stomach. My wife saw it too. I knew by the way her eyes narrowed just slightly, by the way her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. But she didn't say anything either. We both pretended not to notice, because acknowledging it meant facing a truth we weren't ready for. Emily didn't stay long that day. She left early, claiming she had chores, errands, things to do with Mark. Her voice was light, but her hands shook as she tied her hair back. A tiny tremor, almost invisible, but to a parent, nothing is invisible. When she hugged us goodbye, she did it quickly, too quickly, and her shoulders tightened as I held her. I felt the tension like a warning. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. 2 days later, the second piece of evidence appeared. My wife had baked Emily's favorite muffins. She packed them neatly into a tin and asked me to drop them off after work. "Don't stay," she said quietly. "Just give them to her and come home." She didn't say why. She didn't need to. When I reached the apartment building, I texted Emily, "Outside with muffins." "No rush," she replied. "Not home, sorry." But something nudged me, a subtle instinct I couldn't shake. So instead of leaving immediately, I waited in the car. 5 minutes passed, 10:15. Then, I saw it. Not Emily, Mark. He stepped out of the building with a fast, irritated stride and headed to his car. He didn't look around. He didn't smile. He didn't carry shopping bags or groceries. He just walked out, got into his car, and drove off. And when I glanced up at the apartment window, Emily was standing there, behind the glass, still, watching him leave. She hadn't seen me yet. She looked exhausted, pale, drained, like someone had deflated all the light inside her. I raised my hand instinctively, ready to wave, but then something stopped me. She stepped back from the window so quickly, it looked like fear, as if she was afraid he'd catch her looking out, as if she wasn't allowed to stand there. My throat tightened. She wasn't busy, she wasn't not home. She was hiding from him, from us, from something she couldn't explain. I drove the muffins back, home untouched. My wife didn't ask any questions when she saw the tin still full. She just pressed her lips together and whispered, "Okay." That whisper broke something in me. The downward slide accelerated after that. Emily's messages changed. Her words became shorter, colder, like each letter cost her courage she no longer had. "I'm fine, we're good, don't worry." The last one hurt the most, because worry was the only thing I had left. A week later, she called us late at night, past midnight. Her voice shook slightly. "I'm sorry, I know it's late," she whispered. I just wanted to hear your voices." My wife and I sat up instantly. "Honey, are you okay?" my wife asked. Emily hesitated too long, far too long. "Yeah," she lied softly. "Just tired." But then there was a faint sound in the background, a door closing, firm and controlled. Emily inhaled sharply. "I have to go. Love you." The call ended before we could respond. My wife stared at the phone long after the screen went dark. "What is happening to our child?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. We tried to visit her unannounced the following Sunday. It wasn't meant to be a confrontation, just a casual drop-in with groceries and a hug. But the moment we reached her door, a strange, heavy silence clung to the hallway. I knocked. No answer. The hallway remained still. I tried again, gentler, still nothing. I turned to leave, but then I heard it, the faintest shuffle inside the apartment. Not footsteps, more like shrinking back, like someone pressed themselves against the wall, trying not to be heard. My wife's eyes filled with tears. "She's in there," she whispered. "I know. Why won't she open?" I didn't have the courage to say the truth, because she's afraid, not of us, of him, that we left. Not because we wanted to, because staying would have meant forcing her to make a choice she wasn't ready to make. And we didn't want to be the reason she suffered. The next discovery came by accident. My wife was cleaning out a drawer one afternoon when she found something Emily had written years ago, a list she made as a teenager titled, "My future husband must," It was childish, sweet, simple things like, be kind, make me laugh, respect me, love my parents. To my wife, read that last line twice. Love my parents too. Then she said something I'll never forget. He doesn't love us, and Emily knows it. She said it in a trembling whisper, as if speaking the truth might make it more real. That night, I lay awake thinking about everything: the bruise, the lies, the shrinking messages, the tight smiles, the silence behind the door. The truth was forming, cold and unwelcome. Emily wasn't just drifting away. She was being pulled, controlled, shaped into a version of herself that didn't look like the girl we raised, didn't sound like her, didn't feel like her. And then the worst discovery of all. It happened during a visit that we didn't plan, a moment that still burns in my memory. We had gone to the grocery store near her apartment. As we walked out, I saw Emily at the far end of the parking lot. She wasn't with Mark. She wasn't smiling. She was crying hard, shoulders shaking, face buried in her hands, leaning against her car like she was holding herself up. My instinct was immediate. Go to her, hold her, ask what happened. But before we could move, she saw us. Her eyes widened in panic, not relief, not comfort. Panic. She wiped her face quickly, stood straight, and forced a smile that hurt to look at. Hey, I'm fine, really. Just allergies, she said, voice trembling. My wife whispered, Emily. But before she could say more, Emily shook her head quickly, a tiny, desperate shake. No, don't, please. She wasn't crying because of life. She wasn't crying because she needed space. She was crying because she was trapped, and she couldn't let us help. That was the moment I realized the full truth. Our daughter wasn't pulling away from us. She was being isolated, systematically, quietly, piece by piece. And the worst part, she believed she had to protect him, or protect herself from what would happen if she didn't obey. I went home that night with a hollow, sinking feeling. The kind of feeling that grows so heavy you can't breathe around it. The kind that tells you something is coming, something big, something ugly. And I was right. Because the next discovery wasn't hidden. It wasn't subtle. It came as a direct blow. A message that changed everything. A message that read, Mom, Dad, Mark and I are getting married, but you too, you're not invited. And that was the moment the ground finally gave way beneath us. I didn't sleep the night I discovered the truth. I lay awake in the dim light of our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, hearing the quiet hum of the house that had held my entire life together, and realizing that my daughter had torn something inside me that might never heal. But when morning finally crawled in, bringing a thin line of pale light across the curtains, something else arrived with it. Clarity. Not anger, not tears, just clarity. A strange, still quiet, settled inside me. The kind that comes only after you've reached the deepest point of pain. I realized that I had spent years trying to protect my daughter, shield her, support her, believe in her even when she chose others over us. But now, she had taken the final step. She had banned us from her wedding, the day we had imagined since she was a little girl running barefoot in the garden. And somehow, instead of breaking me more, it steadied me. I sat up in bed, slow, almost mechanical, feeling older than I had ever felt. My husband looked at me, his eyes red from his own sleepless night. Are you okay? He whispered. I nodded, not because I was okay, but because something inside me had shifted. We're done begging, I said quietly. He didn't argue, he didn't question, he just took a long breath and nodded back. Maybe he had reached the same point. Maybe he, too, was tired of chasing a daughter who didn't want us unless it suited her. A silence settled between us again. But this time it wasn't painful. It was agreement, a silent pact. And that's when the resolve began forming inside my mind. Not revenge, not a plan to crash her wedding, not a dramatic confrontation. No. Something colder, simpler, cleaner. We would take control of the one thing she never expected, our absence. She thought banning us would hurt us, but what she didn't expect was what would happen when we actually stepped out of the picture, calmly, quietly, permanently. But before any decision could be final, I needed one thing: closure. Not from her, from myself. So that entire morning, I walked around the house in a strange trance. I touched the photo frames lining the hallway: her kindergarten graduation, her first bike ride, her 16th birthday, where she refused to smile because she didn't like her haircut. Every memory was a small cut, but every cut also made me stronger. I folded the scrapbook I had made for her wedding day, the one she would never receive. I placed it inside a box, closed the lid slowly, and with it, closed a chapter of my life. Meanwhile, my husband made coffee, but neither of us drank it. It went cold on the table. We just sat there, thinking, breathing, rebuilding. Then he said, "We should do something." "Like what?" I asked softly. "Anything that is in single quotes this. And he was right. We needed distance. We needed space. We needed to reclaim ourselves, our peace, our dignity before the wedding day arrived. That idea grew over the next hour. A weekend trip, a spontaneous getaway, something we had never allowed ourselves because we were always on call for our daughter's needs. For once, we would choose us, but under that decision, something else brewed quietly inside me, something I didn't confess yet, not even to him. I wanted to know what would happen if we truly stepped out of her life, not halfway, not with guilt pulling us back, completely. I wanted to see if the world she built without us would stand. That was the beginning of my plan. Though I didn't call it a plan at the time, it was simply a shift, a mental closing of a door she had slammed in our faces first. Still, the mother in me couldn't let go instantly. There was a part of me that kept hoping maybe she'd call, maybe she'd reconsider, maybe she'd apologize. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. And the more I accepted that, the sharper my clarity became. By afternoon, I picked up my phone not to call her, but to silence notifications from her fiancé and their friends. I removed myself from the group chat where her fiancé's mother had been acting like the wedding queen. I unfollowed the wedding planner's updates she kept tagging me in. Then I did something even harder. I turned the wedding date on my calendar gray, not deleted, just grayed out, like something that used to matter. A symbolic step, a small cold victory. My husband saw me do it, and when he put his hand over mine, I knew we were in this together. The rest of the day we planned our smallest but place by the lake we hadn't visited in 20 years. A quiet, secluded rental cabin, just the two of us. It felt strange to choose happiness in the middle of heartbreak, like we were stealing it. But maybe that's what healing looks like at first, awkward and unfamiliar. And yet, even as I booked the cabin, a different kind of strength settled in my chest. A resolve. If she didn't want us at her wedding, fine. But she would learn, one way or another, what it truly meant to remove your parents from your life. She would learn what it was to live without the emotional safety net she took for granted. And she would learn it not because we punished her, but because we finally stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own choices. That evening, my husband lit a small fire in the living room. We sat together, not talking much, but thinking the same thoughts. I felt pain. Yes, a deep, grieving pain. But under it, a new emotion began rising. Carefully control. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was reclaiming myself, like I was waking up after a long, exhausting sleep. But even with this calm resolve, one question echoed inside me. If she wants a life without us, then what happens when she truly gets it? That question became the quiet fire inside me, the thing that would guide everything that happened next. I didn't know then how quickly the answer would reveal itself. I didn't know how dramatically. I didn't know that her perfect day would collapse faster than anyone expected. All I knew was this: we were done being the quiet victims of her decisions. The next part of the story, the storm was already forming, and none of us saw it coming. And that realization led straight into the moment everything changed forever. The morning of her wedding arrived quietly for us, not for her, of course. For her, it was supposed to be the biggest day of her life, the day she had spent months crafting, curating, and controlling down to the smallest detail. But for us, it began with the soft rustle of leaves outside the cabin window, the faint chirping of birds, and a stillness I hadn't felt in years. We woke up slowly, almost peacefully. I remember stretching, inhaling that crisp lake air, and thinking, this is the first morning she doesn't expect anything from us. Not a reminder, not a task, not a reassurance. Nothing. And strangely, it felt freeing. My husband made coffee. This time, we actually drank it. We sat by the lake on the old wooden dock, our feet dangling over the water, watching the gentle ripples glide across the surface. It was quiet, too quiet, and that's when my phone began buzzing once, twice, then again and again, a string of calls and messages. Not from her. She wouldn't call. Not from her fiancé. He wouldn't dare. But from other people. People I hadn't spoken to in months. People who never called unless something significant happened. My heart tightened. My husband looked at me. Do you want to check it? I didn't want to, but I did. The screen lit up with a dozen missed calls. And then the message that changed everything. Are you seeing what's happening at the wedding? I froze. Another message came in instantly. She's asking for you. Please answer. I stared at the phone, confused. Asking for me, after banning us, after humiliating us, after choosing everyone else. Why? A video notification arrived next sent by my sister. I tapped it. The screen opened to chaos. Not loud chaos. Worse, whispering chaos. The kind that spreads silently, like smoke from a fire no one wants to acknowledge yet. The wedding hall was packed with guests, all dressed in beautiful pastels and soft golds, but their faces were anxious, confused, slightly embarrassed. The camera jolted as my sister whispered, "She's locked herself in the bridal room. She won't come out." I felt my stomach drop. The video continued, shaky but clear enough to make my breath catch. Her fiancé stood outside the locked door, knocking, trying to stay calm. "Sweetheart, please open the door," he said softly. She didn't reply. Someone tried to adjust her enormous floral arch while whispering, "This is a bad sign. This is really bad." Another bridesmaid wiped her tears, saying, "She's panicking. She keeps saying something is wrong." But then came the sentence that hit me like a physical blow. "She keeps saying she wants her mother." I exhaled sharply, the lake breeze suddenly feeling cold on my skin. She wanted me now. Only now. Not when she banned us. Not when she planned her perfect day. Not when she replaced us with her fiancé's parents. Not during all the months she shut us out. Only now. My husband rubbed a hand over his face, tired, pained. "What do you want to do?" he asked. That question cut straight into me. What did I want to do? For 30 years, the answer would have been simple. Run to her. Fix everything. Protect her from the world and from herself. But today was different. Before I could answer, another video loaded. My sister again, whispering frantically. "She won't walk down the aisle. She just keeps saying, 'They didn't show up. They didn't show up.'" I swallowed hard. The guests were murmuring now, clearly realizing something was deeply wrong. Her fiancé looked pale. His mother looked furious, absolutely livid, and she wasn't hiding it. "She's being dramatic." Her future mother-in-law hissed at someone. "Her parents aren't here because I told her they'd cause a scene," she agreed. "Why is she acting like this now?" My jaw clenched. So it was true. It wasn't just our daughter who banned us. They influenced her, heavily, deliberately. And now, she was crumbling under the weight of their expectations. My sister's voice came again. "She's shaking. She keeps saying, she made a mistake. She's asking for you and Dad." I closed the video. My husband leaned closer. "If you want to go back, we will." But I didn't answer immediately. Because in that moment, a flood of clarity rushed through me, sharper than anything before. Our absence, the very thing she weaponized, had finally revealed the truth. Without us, she wasn't grounded. Without us, she wasn't confident. Without us, she wasn't herself. And without us, her perfect day wasn't perfect at all. It was collapsing. I stood up slowly, staring at the calm lake. The contrast between the peaceful water and the chaos in those videos was surreal. Then my phone rang again, this time a video call from my sister. I answered. She was standing outside the bridal room. Her eyes were wide. "She's asking if you're coming," she whispered. What should I tell her? I took a breath, a long, steady breath. Then I said, "Tell her the truth." My sister frowned, "Which is, that we aren't coming." Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, and then the camera suddenly shifted as she pushed the phone closer to the door. Before she could speak, I heard my daughter's voice from inside the room. "Did they send anything? Did they say something? Did they?" Her voice cracked. She sounded like a terrified child. My heart clenched, but I didn't let it control me. My sister swallowed hard. "They said, they're not coming." Silence. A loud, heavy silence, then a soft, broken sound from inside. A choked sob, a gasp, a muffled cry, and then a single sentence that seared itself into my memory forever. "I thought they'd still choose me." The phone slipped slightly in my sister's hand. She whispered, "What do you want to do now?" I looked at my husband. He took my hand, gentle but firm, grounding me. And I finally said what I knew was right. Let her learn. Let her feel the consequences. Let her see the world she chose. My sister closed her eyes, nodded, and ended the call. My husband and I stood quietly at the edge of the dock, the wind brushing past us. We weren't gloating. We weren't celebrating. We weren't taking revenge. We were simply choosing ourselves. For the first time, back at the wedding, the chaos only grew. Guests whispered. The groom panicked. Plans fell apart. People tried to fix things that couldn't be fixed anymore. Her perfect day had ended right there, not because we didn't show up, but because she finally realized what our presence had meant all along. She had cut us out, and suddenly, she felt the knife's edge herself, and that was the moment everything changed forever. The day of her wedding passed without us. That single fact would have shattered me a few weeks earlier, but as we sat quietly in that lakeside cabin watching the sun sink behind the hills, I felt something I hadn't expected. A strange, tired peace, not joy, not pride, just peace, the kind that comes when a storm has finally ended, even if it leaves debris in its wake. My phone had stopped ringing after a while. The frantic calls slowed, then reduced to a trickle, then faded entirely. It was like the world on the other side of that decision had burned itself out. I didn't ask for updates. I didn't check social media. I didn't want to know. Not yet. I just sat on the porch wrapped in a thin blanket, listening to the soft creak of old wooden boards and the gentle tapping of water against the dock. My husband sat beside me, one hand resting on my knee, the two of us breathing in slow, deliberate rhythm. He finally broke the silence. Do you regret it? I thought about it, truly thought about it. The question was heavy, and part of me wished I could say yes, because regret means you still want to fix things. But the truth was softer, quieter. I regret that it came to this, I said, but I don't regret our choice. He nodded, his eyes reflecting a relief that mirrored my own. We weren't cruel. We weren't punishing her. We were just exhausted. For years, we had stretched ourselves thin, bending over backward to meet her expectations, patch up her mistakes, and cushion her from consequences she never wanted to face. And every time we stepped in, she pulled farther away. Maybe this was the first time she actually felt the distance she had created. We talked a little that night, but not much. Words felt unnecessary. The lake breeze carried more understanding between us than conversation ever could. Eventually, we went inside and turned off our phones completely. Not out of anger, just self-preservation that night. Sleep came easier than I expected, but morning brought questions I couldn't avoid forever. When we finally turned our phones back on, the messages trickled in slowly, not the frantic kind, the aftermath kind. My sister's text came first. She didn't walk down the aisle. I exhaled, a long, slow breath. My husband read over my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. Another message followed. She had a panic attack. They postponed the ceremony. The guests were sent home. I closed my eyes. Not because I was happy, not because I wanted this for her, but because the truth was now undeniable. Our daughter had built her world around the idea that she didn't need us. And when the foundation gave way, the whole structure collapsed. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own choices. There were more messages, from relatives, from old family friends, from people who barely knew us but had heard whispers of what happened. Some blamed her fiancé's mother, some blamed my daughter, some blamed miscommunication, pride, or pressure. Nobody blamed us. That alone felt like a small, painful relief. Finally, after an entire day of silence from her, a notification appeared on my screen. Her name, a single message, just one word. Mom. My breath caught in my throat. My husband put a hand on my back, a quiet anchor. I opened the message. I'm sorry. 2 words, but they carried the weight of everything we had been through. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to respond instantly, tell her we loved her, that everything was okay, that we would fix it somehow, but another part of me, the part that had finally found some sense of self, whispered, not yet, not out of punishment, not out of anger, but because apologies made under panic or collapse don't always turn into real change. They can fade as soon as the crisis fades. I didn't want another cycle. I didn't want years of being pulled in, only to be pushed away again. So, I typed slowly, carefully. Thank you for saying that. We'll talk when you're ready. For now, take care of yourself. I hit send. My hands trembled afterward, not from uncertainty, but from the emotional exhaustion of the past few days finally catching up. She replied after a few minutes, I miss you. A tear slid down my cheek, but again, I didn't rush. I didn't fill the silence with comfort. I simply wrote, we miss you too. Nothing more, boundaries, soft ones, but real ones. For once, I wasn't the parent stitching the wound instantly. I was allowing it to breathe. The next few days at the cabin were quiet, not awkward, just quiet in a healing sort of way. We walked trails, we cooked simple meals, we talked about things we hadn't talked about in years, dreams we had shelved, trips we postponed, hobbies we abandoned. It felt like discovering pieces of ourselves we had misplaced. I realized how much of our identity, had been tied to being her parents, how much of our time had revolved around her wants, her plans, her moods. Now, without that constant weight, we were rediscovering us, not as parents, as people. 3 days after the wedding that wasn't, she finally called. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring once, twice, then picked it up. Her voice was small, shaky, not the confident, stubborn woman she had been for months. Mom, a pause. Can you come home? I need to talk. My throat tightened. I wanted to say yes, but I had learned something in these days, something painful but necessary. If I rushed in now, she might never learn to stand on her own. She might repeat the same patterns. She might crumble again the next time someone else filled the space we had once held. So I answered gently, we'll come tomorrow. A pause, then a quiet, relieved breath from her end. Okay. When the call ended, my husband wrapped his arm around me. You did the right thing, he whispered. I hoped he was right. The next morning, we packed our bags and left the lake cabin behind. It had become a symbol of something unexpected, a turning point, a breath of air after drowning for years, a reminder that parents are allowed to have lives too. The drive home was calm, no tension, no fear, just quiet hope. Not for reconciliation, not entirely, but for honesty, boundaries, and growth, for a new beginning. I didn't know what would happen when we reached home. Would she break down? Would she blame us? Would she finally understand? I didn't know, but I felt stronger than when this started. My husband felt stronger. We felt united, steady, ready. Whatever awaited us, we would face it together, not as desperate parents trying to fix everything, but as people who finally understood their worth. The house came into view, familiar yet different. Somehow, my heart thudded. My hand trembled on the door handle. And just before we stepped inside, I whispered to myself, whatever happens now, we will not lose ourselves again. The story wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like we were walking into a chapter we chose, not one forced on us. And what happened when we opened that door changed everything again. When we opened the front door, the house felt strangely still, as if it had been holding its breath while we were gone. And there she was, our daughter, standing in the hallway, not in a wedding dress, not in makeup or ornaments, but in a simple sweatshirt, her eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, none of us moved. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, like the weight of the world had collapsed inward and left her hollow. Mom, Dad, she whispered, and just hearing those words, spoken with no pride, no defiance, no distance, just raw, vulnerable honesty, hit me harder than anything else in this entire journey. She walked toward us slowly, as if testing the ground beneath her feet. Then she stopped a few steps away. I messed up, she said, her voice cracking. I thought I was strong enough to do everything without you. I thought I didn't need you anymore. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, embarrassed. I was wrong. I didn't rush to hold her. Neither did my husband. We simply stood and let her speak. Because for the first time, she wasn't asking to be rescued. She was admitting she was human. She told us everything: how the pressure from her fiancé's family grew, how she felt trapped in expectations, how she became ashamed of depending on us, how she thought that distancing from us made her appear more grown-up, how she convinced herself we were too much, only to realize on her wedding day that we were her emotional anchor all along. I kept thinking you'd show up anyway, she whispered. No matter what I did, no matter how I acted, I thought you'd come because you always do. That sentence cut deep, because it was true. For years, we had been the safety net she walked all over. For years, she assumed unconditional love meant unconditional tolerance. But this time, we didn't appear. This time, we didn't absorb the blow, and that changed everything. She cried again, softer now. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I'm sorry for choosing people who didn't care. I'm sorry for hurting you. I don't know who I am without you. I finally stepped forward and rested a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to be without us, I said softly, but you do have to learn who you are with us. My husband nodded. Boundaries, not walls. Connection, not dependence. She hugged us then, not desperately, not dramatically, just honestly. A real hug, a beginning, not a bandage. The three of us stood there for a long time, breathing in the fragile peace of reconciliation. We didn't talk about the wedding. We didn't talk about the fiancé. We didn't talk about what came next. Because healing doesn't start with logistics. It starts with truth. The next few days were gentle. She stayed close, quieter than usual, humbled but open. We talked not about blame but about patterns, expectations, and how easily people can drift when they stop seeing each other as human. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't magically healed, but it was real. And that was enough. I realized something during those conversations. As parents, we often love so fiercely that we forget we're allowed to hurt too. We forget we're allowed to step back. We forget our children grow into people who must face themselves, not just the world. And sometimes, the hardest, kindest thing you can do is let them. Her wedding didn't happen the way she dreamed, but maybe that was necessary. Maybe she needed a broken moment to see the cracks long before they became unbearable. And maybe we needed it too, to remember we still had a life, to remember we were a couple before we were parents, to remember that love doesn't always mean showing up. Sometimes it means stepping back. Weeks passed. She took time to think. She confronted her fiancé about everything she had been hiding. She set her own boundaries for the first time. She apologized to people she had hurt. And she started rebuilding, not from the wedding aisle she never reached, but from the truth she had finally faced. We watched her grow, slowly, hesitantly, honestly, and in that growth, we found our own. Looking back now, I understand something I didn't understand then. A parent's love isn't measured by how quickly you rush in, but by how wisely you step in. Sometimes early, sometimes late, sometimes not at all, but always with intention. Her big day ended in a way none of us expected, but a new life began in a way all of us needed. Our family didn't break that day. It changed, and change, even when painful, is often the doorway to something stronger, something real, something worth walking toward together. And if you're listening to my story right now, maybe you're facing something similar. Maybe you're holding your breath, wondering whether stepping back makes you a bad parent. Maybe you're terrified your child will fall without you there to catch them. But here's the truth I learned. If you never let go, they never learn to stand. And sometimes standing alone just once is enough to change everything. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. And if you take one moral from all of this, let it be this: love with an open heart, but hold your boundaries with steady hands.